It is Thursday, August 8th, 2024 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather is the land of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Mdewakanton means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. The first item on the agenda is 1.0, roll call. Dana?
Ryan Clark is absent. Sharon Van Leer.
Present.
Eric Tessmer is absent. Pat Driscoll.
Here.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Simi Petnaik.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here. Okay, 2.0, Pledge of Allegiance. Stand. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 3.0 is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Sharon, seconded by Simi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 4.0 is introduction of Director of Community Education, Jake Winchell, introduced by Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. I was going to pause while there, Jake, make you a little nervous. I don't know if I told Jake that our workshop meetings are a little bit more casual, but this is his first meeting here in South Washington County Schools. We're excited to welcome Jake as our new Community Education Director. And something you should know is Jake doesn't really have an office yet because, you know, DPC is under construction. And so he has been making his way into I'll call it a reformed office with a white table, I think, as his desk, but he is doing well. He has been out at schools. We actually went out and took a look. And what I noticed right away that I absolutely loved was just how much he loves kids. When you can get down and have a conversation with little friends who are playing with animals and play people, you know you have a great community education director. So we're excited to welcome Jake to the district. And I'll just give him a chance if he would like to share anything with the group. I told him about 30 minutes, so sit back.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Happy to be here. I've been here a little over a month. It's been a wonderful first month on the job. Sometimes I go home at night and I think I can't believe I get to work with the people around this table and the people in community education. Truly do feel like I'm very fortunate to be here in South Washington County. I've loved every second of my first month here so far, and things are going well at Armstrong in our reformed office. We're starting to pack up, so next week we're going to be back at the DPC, at least my office and a few others. So it's been a wonderful start. Very proud to be a part of this community and the school district.
And maybe just to add, Jake will be back either with him and some of his team members giving us an update on summer programming as we enter September.
Right, thank you and welcome. Okay, 5.0 is our workshop items. We do have one tonight, and it is 5.1 board compensation, and it will be presented by me. I suppose I could say Katie Schwartz, school board chair. Okay, so the purpose of this is we have heard some things in the community regarding how much board members actually make. A lot of people think we make a lot more than we actually do. So I thought we could have a discussion tonight about, I think it's what the top 10 districts in size comparable to ours. And just to note, the actual compensation since I've been on the board has not really changed. We did change from a $50 stipend, and that was added into the actual compensation. And that's really the only one. I don't even know, do you know offhand the last time, Chris, by any chance? Oh, was it in here? That's when that was done, but do you know when like an actual, if there's, because I think that's when we went up that the stipend was changed.
Dana, did you?
I didn't put it in the report, but I did send an email, so let me find that.
Okay, when Dana finds it, she'll let us know. But so at least since 2000 and in 2002 it was the 4,800, and then like we said we did increase up to that other amount, and it's been since 2018. So just for comparison, Anoka Hennepin for a board member is 14,400. St. Paul, which we haven't gotten an update since 2019, is 18,000. Rosemount, Apple Valley, Egan is 9,000. Minneapolis is 20,000. Osseo is 15. Rochester, 16,000. Elk River, 7,000. Wayzata is 4,700, and Lakeville is 6,750. And then we come in at that 5,700. Yes, Dana.
So Katie, board members are currently at 5,700 per year, and from 2002 to 2017, compensation was at 4,800, and in 2017, it was increased to 5,400, and has been at 5,700 since 2018. So 17 and 18 was probably the stipend change. It's in the admin report, item.
Yeah, it's 4,800.
4,800.
Yep, until 2017, and it went up in 2017.
That is annually. Yes, yes. Yes, that is the annual amount.
Weekly.
So as you can see, when we compare ourselves to the, even the 2, the 5, and the 7, so Osseo is at 15,000 and Rochester is at 16,000, and those would be the 5 and 7. Rochester is very close to our size. I know they've talked that we could flip at any moment between us and Rochester, between 6 and 7, and theirs is 16,000 a year. So I thought we would have a conversation if we do want to consider increasing. We can increase at any time. We can talk about that we could, this is something generally that's done in January, but again, I don't think we've had this conversation for a very long time. I don't ever remember having. No, and honestly, I don't remember ever having it either.
You've been on the board for how long? Yeah, we've had.
11 years.
Yeah, we had it with.
Yeah, one time we had the conversation with Ron and we left it
Yeah.
as is. So just a conversation about what we feel we want to do at this time.
Well, I always thought that it was really low. Be comparable to other districts and competitive with who becomes a board member. I think I would like to, as a board member, make more than what we're doing. And Ron told us that, well, after all, we're volunteers to begin with. So I don't expect a lot of money, but, this is really telling about how we're not respecting ourselves here. It isn't an easy job. You guys work really hard. You go to a lot of events and things, and so I think it's imperative that we increase it significantly.
So I'll just say, obviously I didn't run for the board for the money. I do it because I like the kids and like being on the board, but it would be nice to be able to make a little bit more. In my regular job outside of here, I'm not able to work full-time because of all the commitments that are involved in being on the board.
So I have a couple questions. Do we know, and maybe we do, maybe we don't, do any of these other boards have automatic mechanisms for pay increases or for pay evaluation? Like, I know the Washington County Commissioners, I think their pay is tied to their pay increases are tied to the pay of one of the bargaining units within Washington County. So if a bargaining unit, whatever bargaining unit, if they get a pay increase of 0, the commissioners get a pay increase of 0. If they get a pay increase of, 5%, then the commissioners get a pay increase of 5%. So there's some sort of automatic mechanism, and that may be something worth considering. I was telling Julie earlier today, I didn't realize that this was a paid position until after I was elected, and they asked me to fill out, what is it, like the W-9 or whatever, and I was like, why do I have to fill this out? So thank you, taxpayers, for that unanticipated gift. But one of the challenges with being paid low is that you only get people who have money being able to be on the board. And I think that's if you are working a second job, or if you're, or if you're somebody who wants to be more involved on the school board, but you require more pay in order to do so, I think the low pay does impact, the ability of somebody who is a lower wage worker from doing so, which I think is an issue because I think it prevents us from having a full picture of what different experiences in the district is like. That said, I also know that we don't want to be, I don't want to be like Hennepin County. Didn't their commissioners vote themselves like a 50% increase or something like that the other day? And I don't want to be that either. And so it would be, I don't know, I think it would be helpful to understand what other boards do. Are there any, does MSBA or are there any state level organizations that have done any sort of compensation surveys or offered up compensation guidelines about what is a reasonable amount for a district to spend, whether it is per student or per board member or something along those lines?
I have not seen anything in the way of compensation, and I think by looking at this chart, we would see that there really are no parameters because it's really all over the board. I mean, you can even see not just in the base, but also different rankings for your chair, your vice chair, your treasurer, et cetera.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I think some of these board members on this list, I think some of these salaries are high. But that is my own personal opinion based on my own viewpoint of how much board members, at least in our district, spend, I think, in terms of time commitment. And so, yeah, I don't know what we would, I mean, I think probably the simplest thing to do is to look at maybe how much time we spend and think about whether or not the amount we are paid is reasonable for the amount of time that each given board member spends doing the work of being on the board. And then thinking about, do we want to explore an option like Washington County does, where there is some automatic mechanism where pay goes up so that you don't have, because $4,800 in 2002 is worth a lot more than $5,700 in 2024, right? So, serving on the board without any increase, just like we don't, our staff would like to not come out behind, and, we don't have the same, all the different mechanisms that we can put with our pay, we can do when we're negotiating with a bargaining unit. But, I don't know that it's appropriate for us to be paid less now than 20 years ago, at least in real dollars. I just don't know. I actually don't know what $4,800 in 2002 is in 2024 dollars. Do you know, Chris?
Less. I'd have to. I could
by our new director of fiscal services over there.
I think that. So when we when we talk the inflation factor, even on the, frequently Dan and I would present the that gap kind of in funding from the state, right? And so I always think of that, and so I would say in those real dollars as well, I have zero doubt that that number would be quite a lot higher, and we certainly could provide that to Julie. So.
Yeah, I mean, but to that point, if we're getting less per student from the state government in real dollars, I don't know, I do think that the board should be, impacted by that less funding per student, just like every other staff member in the district is.
And I guess I more meant that as far as that inflation, if we just had straight up tied that number to kind of overall inflation, certainly that 48 would be higher. Just a thought to throw out there would be maybe formula increase would be as the state on that base formula, as you're talking just what rates might be tied to some sort of auto mechanism if you did, would be just one thought.
One thing to remember when Washington County does that, though, a Washington County commissioner is more a full-time position. Correct. Versus this. I mean, if you would give us a 2% increase, what would I mean, you wouldn't even need to do a 2% increase because we wouldn't even see a 2% increase versus if, I mean, the Washington County Commissioners make 70-some thousand a year. So a 2% increase on their salary is obviously going to be, is real dollars. And they are more expected to be full-time doing what they're doing. So, but I do know that, when I was on the 916, we did talk about an increase and there was nothing that we could. Yeah, and there was nothing that we really could compare. We had asked some of those same questions on trying to figure out, because for 916, it's even harder to try and compare because they have one meeting a month. We have two. There really are no other extra committees and those types of things. Yeah. So, but they did ask those same questions and there weren't any comparables. Sharon, do you have any?
I was just going to say it's on 916 now, so they did get a raise for this coming year, and I think it's like 200 per person, but their raise will come almost comparable for one meeting a month of what ours is now.
So their one meeting a month is the same pay or roughly the same pay as our two meetings a month.
It's slightly less, but there's also not all the committees and stuff when you're with 916 and all the commitments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a cost of living raise. You know, that would keep up with times, but gas is going up and we're staying the same. But I think, you know, we've talked about this numerous times, and I think it's time. That's my thought. And I agree with Pat.
Okay, so next question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go? I mean, I can't see us doing a $10,000 increase and getting up to where Rochester is. That's like crazy, obviously. But I mean, even if you think, and I know you mentioned like 50% is, but I mean, even if we double, we're still pretty low compared to some of these others. So I think we need to look at how do we want to do it and do we want to stagger it? Because we could start in, I don't know, we'd have to talk to our financial people when they could actually get it started. But approved, yeah, once it's approved, we could start on this date and then there could be an additional one maybe come January, or, you know, we could stagger so that we're not all of it as well. Where do we want to start?
Oh, I was going to say, one thing I think I would like to encourage us to think about is having the chair get paid more than the other members. And that's just, I think, a reflection of the amount of responsibility that the chair has relative to the rest of the board. And I can say that because I'm not the chair. And so, but, you know, and you notice that, like, I think in most of the other districts, that seems to be a pretty common, a pretty common thing, that it looks like the other districts, you know, the chair is paid, I don't know, 10%-ish or so more than the rest of the board. I think it would be helpful, like, you know, because the only district that's paid less than us is Wayzata. And do we know how many kids Wayzata has in their enrollment?
Yeah, Dana can use the Googler. We're all off computers, but Dana's over there.
Yeah. And do we know if all of these have 7 board members, Dana, by any chance? Or do we know if some have 5?
Anoka has 6.
Mm-hmm. Anoka has 6. Yeah, I knew that one because that's crazy.
Yeah, because you always see them in the paper.
It would also be nice to know if, you know, like we talked about before, like what all their responsibilities are compared to ours, but it would also be nice to know, are these figures here something that they're changing starting in January at all either, if any of them are getting increases, or if these are something that are more recent increases?
I don't know that we would necessarily know. Like St. Paul's, we know is from 2019 was the last time they put it out there. Usually you only see it in an election because they'll post it.
And I think you also have to, like, if there's any increases, you might have to, like, literally go through the notes of their board meetings to find out what the vote, you know, I mean, like,
and I
it's a
think
manual
if we
process.
had a little time, Dana could certainly reach out to the different districts to talk about when was their last increase. You know, are they anticipating one in January? So that could do like a second step. But I think the question is there a step the board would like to take now that could be implemented starting September 1st, because we still have one more board meeting in August. So I think that would be the question. Dana, what did you find out about Wayzata?
Wayzata has 12,625 students as their enrollment as of October 10th.
Sorry, what did you say, 12,000?
625.
625?
And we're at 18 something, correct?
According to
18,900.
these are MDE's numbers, so at the time, we were at 19,360.
19,360. Yeah, Wayzata has one high school.
Yes.
ADMs, yes.
Oh, this is ADMs, okay. And so, shoot,
So Anoka Hennepin is the top at 38,631, with Lakeville at 12,021. They're listed in order on that sheet, the admin report.
I just want to do some math, and I realize it's probably easier to do it on a computer than in long division.
If you're looking to take all of the totals and divide them by 10 to get the average, it's 12,590.
No, I was looking to take the dollars per, I was looking to take the dollars per student of the member. So like, if this were an Excel sheet, to just put the students and then do a little formula, so.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest as a raise, to get to that amount. But what I'm thinking is 10 this year, then 12 the next year. Because we have 3 high schools, we have how many elementaries and middle schools, and it's a lot of legwork. And I think we'll have an easier time getting new board members on if we pay more. So, and I know, yeah, so.
Do we know community-wise? I know we talk students, but let's face it, we also talk to people that don't have kids in the district. We get emails from people that aren't in the district. Do we know community size where we would sit in?
I don't, but we can get that information.
And we know that we draw in a lot of kids from our county. Remember that capture rate we know was high.
Yeah, I was going to also suggest adding up the 10 and dividing it. And also, it kind of makes sense because we're in the middle of the top 10 too, as far as our size.
To kind of be in that median range.
A lot more schools than Wayzata. You know.
Wayzata has one high school, but it's enormous.
Yeah,
It's a giant high school. Like, and that's a deliberate, I am friends with someone on the Wayzata board, and that's a deliberate choice that they
Okay,
make.
but how many other buildings, you know?
Yeah, but if they just have, I mean, yeah, I get it, but they have, I think their high school is like, what, like 4,000 or 5,000?
It's huge.
It's
It's like
huge.
two of ours
It's
almost,
enormous
yeah.
school.
So anyway, that's just my opinion.
Nice to know, like, what's in the budget too. You know, I mean, I don't want to put the district in any type of situation either. So.
To be honest, I don't think
Yeah.
4,300 per board member is really going to make or break what are we at now for the budget? Is it still 2 million or are we at 3 million now?
Maybe we want to do the budget report first. No.
Well, newsflash, but and it'll be in my presentation too, right? As long as I can get to that page. The expenditures anticipated for next year are 333 million total. So as far as a percentage of it, wouldn't be significant. We did approve a deficit budget for this 2025, but as far as that, you know, if we said 5,000 per board member, you know, like that amount as a percentage would be very low as a change overall.
So if we went up to the 10, like Pat suggested, which would be an increase of 4,300 per person per year, is not going to really change much that we're.
30,000.
It won't affect the fund balance, because I don't want that fund balance touched.
I think,
Wouldn't even hire a teacher.
and it's, you know, it's still dollars, right? And so it absolutely is still dollars that will increase that deficit barring anything else. And so certainly as a percentage of the whole, it's a very small percentage, right? When we talk, when we look at budget and we look at how our numbers come in at the end, we, you know, frequently are like, ooh, Dan and I would usually have a fight. He'd be like, oh, I'm closer on revenues, and sometimes a percentage, right? And he would always say a percentage here is a really large number. So it would be a 0.0, and I could have Simi do her long math real fast. But I could even, you know, if you said 30,000 off of here, that's, you know, start moving that decimal point over even at 333, it's a very small percentage anyway, but it is still dollars.
So, yeah, so just doing like a little quick math, because Mama loves her math. If we paid ourselves on the per student basis of like a Wayzata or an Anoka Hennepin, we would be paid somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,200. Like, and that's if we took, but if we paid ourselves like Lakeville, that would be like 11,000. So there's a big, I mean, and then Rochester, apparently we would triple our salaries.
Yeah, we would be close to what Rochester is, since their
Yeah.
numbers are very close.
Yeah, it would be basically equivalent. So, I mean, I think at a minimum, like looking at us per student is as good a rough estimate of what appropriate pay could look like, and it would just be taking kind of an average of what, or maybe not even an average, maybe some sort of, or maybe a weighted average. Oh, wouldn't that be fun, Chris? Because I would like there to be more logic behind what our pay is besides just like feelings. But that's my own personal, bias. I like to logic my way through things.
I think it's hard
Abby?
for a board member to say, though, to be paid by student when we know that
Yeah,
a lot of who we're talking to are not actual students.
Right, but that's
So,
how we get
mean,
compensated as a district, right? So, I mean, that's
Correct,
why I say.
correct, yeah, but, I mean, some of our numbers come from, community education comes from actual, like,
Population,
population.
that's true.
Their budget does, so,
To make a motion?
we can.
Oh,
It's a workshop, so whatever we would decide to do, we could bring it forward at our next board meeting, and that would be where we would make the motion. But we need some sort of amount, or we could let somebody else make the decision for us.
Well, what we could do is arbitration. Go ahead, Abby. Go into negotiation, girl. You are the queen.
I do want to put in the space one thing that we've talked about, and, with hiring, we know what it does when we can pay our staff, when we can pay the administrators that sit around the table, and we've actually taken in the last 4 years really great pride in being able to hold our own when it comes to making sure that we can hire some of the best people, including the people that sit around this table. And so I think, depending what the board's philosophy is what is the feeling around our board members as well? Because we know that it's much easier to attract and retain high-quality people when there is a compensation that is comparable to other districts.
So I agree when we're hiring people, but I'm not sure that I don't know that that's necessarily the case for people who choosing to run for the board, because I don't know how much, I literally don't know how much finances factor into somebody's decision to choose to run. Like, I think if you don't have a lot of money and you look at, okay, now I've got to spend all this time and the compensation is not good, you're not going to run. But unless you happen to be fired up over some issue, or you're really passionate, or you somehow know how to make it work. And so I don't want to be there's a difference, sort of like Katie was saying about the commissioners being full-time in Washington County, like there's a difference between compensating a teacher or an administrator, and a difference in compensating us. But, it sounds like, I do think looking at this, we are clearly undercompensated compared to everyone else in the
could I make
in the
a
metro.
suggestion? Could I see how many people would be in favor of a 10,000 this year and 12,000 next year? Or is there some other number that you want to come up with? Because we've been talking for a half an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah. I think we all understand either you do or you don't want to raise, and how much. So each of us say our piece.
I don't know how much, but I'm in favor of a raise.
Would you be comfortable with 10,000?
I didn't hear you.
Would you be comfortable with 10,000?
Yeah, I would.
Linda?
Yeah, I think the 12,000 would be good, but if we start off with 10,000, because, 12,000 is right down the middle of everybody.
Simi?
My gut says 10,000 is on the high side, so I would, but part of me also is, if you're wondering what I'm doing, is literally doing the math of, so I'm just trying to figure out if maybe that is a reasonable amount. I just don't want to be an outlier either in terms of what other boards are compensated.
Okay, so I think we have,
But we didn't hear from you yet.
I think we have enough information to move forward. And we will put this on the agenda with an amount.
With an amount you
How
said?
much?
And I think we'll just want to clarify, is that $10,000 in addition to the $5,700 for the
No.
rest of the year, or a total of 10?
Total
Because
of
in
10.
terms of breaking it down for the rest of the year.
Yes,
Yeah.
total of 10,
So 10,000.
yes.
And we'll add that to the next.
And then we can have a conversation in January if we feel we want to increase it.
And we might want to keep that, Dana, just as a standing item on that January agenda.
It is
It
always
is
on the
on there,
agenda.
we've just never actually taken the time to discuss it.
I would only ask that there be an effective date then.
Huh?
I said I would only ask that we make sure there's an effective date on that.
So
in
if we
August.
would make it effective September 1, it would be paid September 15th, correct?
I would hope
Is
that
that
we'd
how,
be able to.
is that how,
yes.
that's how, okay. I never remember, I think I get paid on the 14th and the 31st, or the 15th and the 31st for my day job, and I don't know what days it's for.
Twice
They
a
just
month.
give me the money, I don't know what days it's for. Just shows up in my checking account. So we could, September 1st wouldn't be too early because you'd actually have 15 days if we would vote next meeting.
Yes, that would be sufficient time for us to incorporate that for the
That's
night.
what I was trying to
Do we get
speak
paid every 2
poorly.
weeks, or do we get paid every 15
Twice a
days?
month.
Twice a month.
Twice a month, yeah. The-
15th and 30th is, but depending how the calendar falls, it might
I was gonna say,
be a little
sometimes
early.
I'll like wake up and my bank says, hey, you have a deposit, and I'm like, it's like a really random day of the week. Okay. I wish I paid my car payment. Okay,
I'm sorry, I have a question, because there
Yeah.
was discussion of having the board chair's salary increased. Are we keeping it at 10 for everyone?
I would advocate
to
for
leave it at
whatever.
10.
Oh, I was going to say, I would advocate that for whatever we do, I think the board chair should be paid some percentage above what the members are paid. Maybe like 10% or something like that as a reflection of the increased duties of the board chair.
or we could discuss that
Or we could
in
discuss that in
January.
January.
At the
Yeah,
January
let's
meeting,
discuss
if
that in
we
the
want to
January meeting.
change, yeah. Are we, okay. I'm going to move on to 6.0, information item, 6.1, construction update, presented by Tyrone Brookins, Assistant Superintendent.
All right, good evening, everyone. There's a saying that you measure twice and you cut once. And as part of this construction advisory update, we're still in the measuring stages of the work. And so we are continuing with our advisory meetings taking place at our middle schools and our high schools. We also have a standing meeting with the city of Woodbury, and then we also have a standing meeting with our construction advisory group. We are also poised to begin the design phase for our elementary schools beginning in January of 2025, and we have 4 projects that we will start that process with. We have an update in regards to furniture, fixtures, and equipment that I will refer to as FF&E, and it is an invitation to respond to the FF&E request for proposal was sent to 6 vendors, 4 of whom submitted proposals. A review team, which included representatives from Krauss Anderson, Wold and Comer Architects, in addition to district staff, evaluated the proposals based on specific criteria identified in the RFP, and the review team unanimously agreed to move forward with the highest scoring vendor, which was Innovative Office Systems, as our primary FF&E vendor partner. IOS has significant experience in the K-12 market and with projects spanning multiple years and impacting multiple schools and districts. We will bring a middle school update early fall to this group. And lastly, all information regarding our construction can be found on our website at SoWashCo.org/construction.
Any questions? Okay. We will move on to 6.2, and that is a financial update presented by Chris Blackburn, Director of Business Services.
Thank you. So I was trying to do real fast math to do 10,000 divided by 24 pay periods. So I'll get that to you by the end of the meeting. Financial update then to this evening is really just the agenda is some terminology. I know that some of our newer school board members aren't with us tonight, but certainly want to just provide, we tend to talk a lot in acronyms, some enrollment updates, just some financial considerations of, I'll call it really more a budget reminder about this year, and then just kind of some next steps to keep you apprised of where we're at. What do we have going on in the finance and payroll world? So again, that's the agenda. The next slide then is enrollment terminology. So we frequently, even tonight, we were talking about average daily membership or ADMs, as well as adjusted pupil units. I did realize on a later slide, I continued to refer to it as WADMs, which is weighted ADMs, and that terminology is dated now, so I will be updating that. But average daily membership is the count of resident students attending South Washington County schools. We take the days the students are enrolled and divide by the total number of the school days in the calendar. And so if you do that for somebody who's enrolled all year, we get a 1.0 ADM. And so that's, as we think about when membership and how that enrollment drives. And so that's kind of that base count that frequently we talk, and so when we budget on ADMs as well. Adjusted pupil units are used for most funding formulas. And so they're the weighted count of students actually served. Secondary students, we actually are paid at a greater amount than elementary students. So for every K through 6 student, they're considered at a 1.0. So we receive the formula times 1.0. And for 7 through 12 secondary students, we receive the formula times 1.2. As far as updates, so as of Monday, our K through 12 student count was 18,752. We're about 34 ahead of budget. And as you recall, it was 18,718. It was our budget set for 24-25. And I always like to remind the board and community that enrollment and staff enrollment is a snapshot in time. I'm looking at Tyrone across the table, and just today I had an email that we have now at 49 new students even from Tuesday until today. So we're continuing to enroll students, and that happened to be at the elementary level. So I always like to remind people it's a snapshot. Sometimes we're like, well, I thought the number was this, and it certainly does change day to day. We sometimes see decreases as well as students make other enrollment choices or families move out of district. So it's a continuing floating number. The historical and projected enrollment then on this slide, the historical enrollment is shown in that darker red color, and then the kind of brighter orange is our 24 number, and I showed that just in an offset because we're still finalizing those numbers and will for some time yet. And then the lighter orange is our projected 24-25 enrollment. And as we look forward, those gray bars is really that projected. And I wanted to put this slide in here to show not only did we, in those years shown, have we gone from 17,798 to, like I said, we're looking at 18,851, our highest ever for 23-24. But then again, this to remind everyone that we did project 18,718, and so hopefully we'll come in a little bit better, but that enrollment will really be flat and slightly declining as we look forward. And so the importance of really the intent is to remind the board just the importance of that enrollment and the impact on our revenues thereof. On the next slide, this is really hard to read, and I was debating on taking off some data, but I liked having about 10 years of actual information on there. So Simi, this is just for you, but the projected numbers as well. And again, 23-24 we still show as projected, along with 24-25 in future. But again, it just shows that enrollment growth. You'll notice that ADM column at the bottom is just straight enrollment numbers, and then the WADM, which really now I should have modified to say APU, or adjusted pupil unit, is that waiting for those secondary students. And so I wanted to point this out really and to show demonstrate the enrollment on the revenues, because as we talked that with that in revenue, the enrollment declining and projecting to really stay very flat or slight declines, just the impact on that enrollment. Again, we'll talk a little bit later about the projected deficit for this current year that was approved. And so as you can see, at least a part of that was due to enrollment projections of being slightly down from this current year. On the next slide, then, the implications of that. In general, each student served in South Washington County School generates about $11,859 in state aids and levies. And that does include our operating levy, which again, we're extremely appreciative of our supportive community for those. It also includes some restricted funds, such as operating capital and basic skills. Basic skills largely consists of EL, which is English learner, and compensatory revenue. And the reason I point out those restricted funds is, again, we talked at kind of during budget presentation that those are, we can't spend those just for general operations. So there's very restricted uses on those dollars. In general, to generate $1 million in revenue, we need approximately 84 students then. So like I said, hopefully with this week's, we might have better news. But again, I will also remind the board that fall is typically our highest enrollment. On the next slide then, just continuing to talk enrollment implications, because in addition to receiving funding for K-12 students, we also receive some additional funds for early childhood special education students. We're funded approximately 25% per student, and that's because they're based on the hours that they're served. Voluntary pre-K serves our 4-year-olds in district certain qualifying factors, and then extended time, which often I think sometimes we hear about the summer school that's going on, but it also occurs after school as well, is probably the most common, but we can generate a little additional aid by servicing those students outside of the regular school year. Funding is also reduced by certain factors. The most frequent that we see is post-secondary enrollment options. And so again, that's where students, in particularly 11th and 12th grade, have the opportunity to attend college, and we're funded one of two ways. We either turn over the state aid to the state and they take care of paying the bill, or we can contract, and that's what we do with Century College. By doing that direct contract with the college, it saves us over $50,000 in any given year. Yes, Pat?
Do you know what the funding is for voluntary kindergarten?
So we're actually assigned slots for voluntary pre-K, and they generate additional aid. So they generate the general education aid for VPK and SRP. Okay. The Minnesota State Legislature sets, just a reminder that they set the basic formula per pupil. This amount is then multiplied by enrollment to determine our district revenues. When we look at that basic formula state aid, it generates, quite often we talk about the pie or the dollar bill as we talk expenditures, and on this, the revenue side, that basic state aid is about 43% of our total revenue. All state revenues overall is about 70% of our revenue. And the reason I point out that basic formula is because state aids largely increase through either additional enrollment, and we know we're projected to stay quite flat or a slight decrease, or the basic formula increase. So again, as we projected for 25, the state, we knew that we were given a 2% raise on that, or increase on that base formula. And in FY26, we know that the change to statutory language does have a cap of 3%, but it does provide inflationary. So even though it says inflationary, the cap is 3%, but we're also the statute does have a floor as well of 2%. So 2 to 3% will be our increase. And so when you think of that increase on 43% of our revenue, it becomes slightly challenging, especially with decreasing or flat enrollment. Most of our other revenue is derived from local levy, including operating capital projects levy. Again, extremely grateful for the support of our community for those dollars. So here's my little, as I called it, the budget reminder instead. So 23-24, again, revised budget, we did project a surplus of $1.6 million. And again, as we work through audit and finalize those numbers, we'll hopefully, we always, Dan and I always have tried to be conservative, and I continue in that path as well. So hopefully we will meet that, or maybe even come in a little better, but I always am just cautious until we get those final numbers through audit. For 24-25, the original budget, we had approved a deficit of $5 million, and the percentage change is just what that year to year for revenues and expenditures are. Again, with the inflation on our operating levy, with those revenues, that'll have an impact on that as well. And some is just the way the state generates that formula, along with cross-subsidy aid on the special education aid would be probably two of the biggest drivers of that. And the expenses, of course, as we talked, that so much of our budget, roughly 3/4 of our budget, is on salaries and benefits. Which brings me to the next slide. As we look at that increasing over the past number of years, I thought it just beneficial to graphically show what those revenues and expenditures have done in the past since 2019. or fiscal year 19 for actual and then projected. And so like I said, each year I always get a little surprised that sometimes I always tell people it's just scale, right? You know, if I budget for $3,000 on personally or $30,000, here we're talking $300 million. And sometimes I think, oh my goodness. I've staff in my finance department that one said, yep, I started in day 2. I was like, well, here, transfer millions of dollars to pay payroll. So, but again, the biggest chunk of that is on the revenue side, again, is enrollment based. The levy approvals is a second biggest portion of that. And then, as you can tell, when those revenues floated a little bit, we did have, during the pandemic, some significant COVID federal aids that came in as a result of that. And then on the expense side, it really is that staffing piece, again, driving those costs. The unassigned fund balance projection, just again, that reminder that we are projected to be at 13.5% at the end of this 24 fiscal year, this past that we just finalized. And 10.8 is our projection for end of 25. So again, without any adjustments or any other changes, that's where we're projecting to be at the end of the year. And a reminder to the board that we do have a target of 16.6 at the end of fiscal year 27. So we'll have a little bit of work to do. Lastly, the next steps, and I didn't really know quite what to call this other than what do we have going on in finance, and what's coming up next for the board is to know that administration will continue to monitor that enrollment and to hopefully keep student information real busy enrolling students, but they certainly have had their work cut out for them the last few weeks particularly. The audit of our 23-24 fiscal year begins, and I'll say that we did start just some preliminary work in July, and we'll continue through that. The primary bulk of that field work does occur in mid-October to early November, and so typically have pretty well finalized numbers towards the end of November. Levy work, so next month you'll see me again, and we'll be talking about preliminary levies in September, and then the school board approves those levies in December as part of the truth and taxation hearing we'll have as well at that time. The audit will be presented to the school board typically in early January, and then we'll begin working on 25-26 budget. So I always tell people that in finance we have 2 seasons, and that's audit and budget. So with that, I will look for any questions.
I just have a quick clarification question. With the enrollment update, how in the slides it talked about being 34 ahead of budget, and then you said Tyrone said 49 now. Is the 49 in addition to the 34, or are we at 49
It's
now?
in addition.
So it's 83?
Correct.
Okay.
Today, anyway. Tomorrow, it'll be a different number. One more till 1 million, Pat.
They're a lucky winner when they walk in the door.
Been a lot of foot traffic out front, so which is wonderful. We, always want to service the students coming in too, but just as we look at those projections, that's where it's hard to know how many students long-term that we'll continue to bring in too, just with the changes as Hazel had done her study as well.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, on to 6.3, and that's the first reading of proposed policy changes presented by Julie Nielsen, Superintendent.
Thank you. The 11 policies being brought forward this evening have been reviewed and revised to reflect updates in Minnesota statute, definition of terms, legal references, and cross-references. The Board Policy Committee met with district administrators to review those policies and make any other recommendations to administration. As you're aware, all of our policies can be found online. In our policies for this evening, we have policies in the 200 series, 300 series, and then a couple of other ones that were in need of revision. So to begin, I'm just going to talk about the 3 policies that we are recommending removal. 201.1 school board elections. Everything in that policy is legal or procedural in nature, so we are recommending removal. The next one, 201.2, the application and balloting procedure. The same, all procedural and requesting to remove the policy. I should also note that 201.1 and 201.2 are not in MSBA's model policies as well. 216, school district attorney. There is no MSBA policy for that. It is part of the January organizational meeting, and so we are recommending removal of that policy. As I hop back up to 201, our legal status of the school board, in that particular policy, there were terminology and legal updates. 202, school board officers, there were some technical grammar and terminology and legal updates. Public hearings, policy 207, we are requesting that that policy remain the same. Policy 301, School District Administration, that we did a removal of a cross-reference. 306, Administrator Code of Ethics, just a title change to a statute. 516 was student medication. I believe that was brought forward by Aaron. Add new statutory provisions and rearrange just the overall policy in the sections for clarity of understanding. 721.1, our wellness policy, just some legal updates. And then finally, 808, service animals, also brought forward by Aaron, just renumbered in terms of it turning into an 808 policy, renumbered to match MSBA's model policy. And so with that, this evening, it's just for information. Does the board have any comments or input?
Do we have any comments or, yeah, comments? No. Okay, on to 7.0, reports and comments. And first up is Superintendent Julie Nielsen.
I just go right from policies to this. Well, I think I keep telling the board, it's like we get into August and I keep saying like, oh, it's really ramping up, but I'm going to tell you it's really ramping up now. Last week we had our welcome back with system leaders, so about 100, 110 leaders all gathered together to get important information, also just to connect, build relationships. In the coming weeks prior to our next board meeting, we will have what we call our school improvement planning. Teams will all be coming together, and those are leaderships from all of our teams and some of our departments. In addition, we will be hosting our South Washington County Schools Academy, which are for our new teachers as well as any probationary year 2 or year 3 and or continuing contract teachers this year who are interested in any of the professional development. So that will be coming up in the time in between our board meetings. I also want to remind people that we have our parades coming up. We've had one. We have our parade for Newport this coming Sunday, the 11th. On August 17th, we will have St. Paul Park. And then that following Sunday, before we start that first day back with teachers, Woodbury Days will be on the 25th. And so board members, community members, we will work to have candy along the route. We know that we'll have items from community education as we do those parades, but they're always a fun time. I also wanted to mention, I know the board is aware that our theme this year is building our story. It's really twofold. The building part, of course, we have a lot of construction going on, and building our story is also around the importance of literacy and the very important training that our staff will be involved in around literacy and making sure that our students are literate. And then finally, a reminder, our August 27th is our all-staff welcome back. Board members are invited to attend that. That will be held at Eastridge High School in the morning. And one other, if I didn't mention this, we had a very successful job fair. Sometimes I lose track in the middle of, did I say this at last board meeting? But we're still hiring, right, Abby? And so I always like to make sure and acknowledge, but Human Resources just did an outstanding job of putting on a job fair, bringing in candidates, walk-in candidates, really just a great day. I think the highlight was we hired 14 paraprofessionals on that given day. So thank you to Human Resources, and those are my updates for the 2 weeks.
Thank you. Any board members have any reports for any events coming up? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to 8.0, future meeting dates. August 22nd, 2024, school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. And then September 12th, 2024, school board workshop meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. And with that, 9.0, and we are adjourned.